Welcome back to the channel, where we dissect the psychological foundations of power, identity, and human behavior. Today we examine two traditions that, at first glance, seem incompatible: Machiavellian realism and Stoic discipline. One appears to endorse strategic manipulation and political ruthlessness. The other advocates virtue, restraint, and inner tranquility. Yet beneath the surface, both confront the same fundamental question: how should a human being act in a world governed by uncertainty, competition, and instability? Let us begin. Machiavelli and Stoicism, a psychological and strategic analysis. To understand the tension between Machiavelli and Stoicism, we must first resist caricature. Machiavelli is often reduced to a doctrine of cynicism. Stoicism is frequently portrayed as passive detachment. Both interpretations obscure the structural sophistication of each tradition. Machiavelli, particularly in The Prince, is less concerned with morality in the abstract than with stability under conditions of political volatility. His fundamental question is pragmatic: how does a leader acquire and maintain power in a world where loyalty is fragile and fortune unpredictable? Stoicism, as articulated by thinkers such as Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, addresses a different but related problem. How does one maintain inner sovereignty in a world beyond one's control? The overlap begins here. Both traditions are preoccupied with control, though they define its boundaries differently. 1. The locus of control: external power versus internal mastery. Stoicism establishes a strict distinction between what is within our control and what is not. Our judgments, intentions, and responses fall within our domain. External events, reputation, wealth, and even bodily health do not. Psychological freedom in this framework requires disciplined attention to this boundary. Machiavelli does not deny external unpredictability. On the contrary, he emphasizes fortuna, the element of contingency that disrupts human plans. However, his response differs. Instead of withdrawing from external ambition, he argues that effective leaders must cultivate virtue, a quality combining decisiveness, adaptability, and strategic boldness. From a contemporary decision science perspective, one might frame this as two strategies for managing uncertainty. Stoicism reduces psychological volatility by narrowing the sphere of concern. Machiavellian strategy attempts to expand influence within uncertainty by increasing adaptive capacity. These are not mutually exclusive. A leader who lacks Stoic composure may become reactive, ruled by fear or anger. Conversely, a purely Stoic withdrawal from political reality may produce moral purity without influence. Consider a modern executive facing market collapse. A Stoic approach would regulate emotional response, preventing panic and preserving clarity. A Machiavellian approach would involve calculated restructuring, perhaps decisive layoffs or aggressive repositioning to maintain institutional survival. Without Stoic discipline, the Machiavellian strategy might devolve into impulsivity. Without Machiavellian realism, Stoic calm might translate into strategic paralysis. The integration of the two traditions suggests a dual architecture of control: internal stability combined with external adaptability. 2. Ethics and effectiveness. Are they in conflict? A central tension emerges around morality. Stoicism grounds action in virtue, understood as alignment with reason and nature. Machiavelli, by contrast, famously argues that a ruler must be prepared to act against conventional morality when necessary. This divergence has generated centuries of debate. Yet the apparent opposition may conceal a deeper convergence. Machiavelli does not celebrate cruelty for its own sake. He frames harsh action as instrumentally justified when it secures political order. Disorder, in his view, produces greater suffering than strategic severity. Stoicism, too, recognizes the importance of rational order. However, its standard for action is internal coherence rather than external dominance. The psychological distinction is subtle but significant. Stoicism treats moral integrity as constitutive of the self. Machiavelli treats moral flexibility as instrumental to survival. Modern leadership research often oscillates between these poles. On one hand, authenticity and ethical consistency are associated with trust and long-term credibility. On the other, crisis leadership sometimes demands decisions that appear ruthless in the short term. An illustrative example might involve a political leader confronting insurgency. A strictly Stoic orientation would emphasize justice, measured response, and principled restraint. A Machiavellian orientation might prioritize swift, decisive suppression to prevent wider chaos. Each approach carries risks. Excessive restraint may embolden instability. Excessive severity may erode legitimacy. The deeper question, then, concerns moral thresholds. At what point does strategic necessity become ethical compromise? Stoicism resists relativism. Machiavelli resists naivety. An integrated framework requires recognizing that power without moral orientation corrodes trust, yet moral absolutism without situational awareness may prove strategically self-defeating. 3. Emotion as liability or resource. Both traditions recognize emotion as potentially destabilizing. Stoics seek to transform destructive passions through rational reinterpretation. They do not advocate emotional numbness but disciplined evaluation. Machiavelli's concern is less therapeutic and more instrumental. He observes that leaders must manage appearances and perceptions. Emotional display therefore becomes a tool. Fear may be more reliable than love if one must choose, he famously suggests. Here the psychological sophistication becomes evident. Machiavelli understands that human beings respond predictably to incentives and threats. Stoicism understands that individuals are vulnerable to their own distorted judgments. Imagine a military commander under extreme pressure. Stoic discipline would prevent internal panic. Machiavellian calculation would guide external messaging to maintain troop morale and deter adversaries. The effective leader must regulate both internal affect and external signaling. From the standpoint of cognitive neuroscience, emotional regulation enhances executive functioning. Without it, threat perception narrows cognitive flexibility. Stoicism offers a method for preserving cognitive bandwidth. Machiavelli offers guidance on how others' emotions can be strategically anticipated and shaped. 4. Reputation, identity, and strategic self-presentation. Stoicism regards reputation as ultimately indifferent. One's character does not depend on public opinion. Machiavelli treats reputation as politically essential. Appear virtuous, even if strategic necessity demands otherwise. This divergence reflects two models of identity. The Stoic self is internally grounded. The Machiavellian self is relationally embedded in networks of perception and power. Contemporary social psychology suggests that identity is neither purely internal nor purely external. Self-concept develops through social feedback loops. A leader indifferent to reputation risks losing influence. A leader enslaved by reputation risks inauthenticity and volatility. A sophisticated synthesis might involve internal commitment to principles combined with conscious management of public perception. This is not hypocrisy in its crude sense. It is strategic communication grounded in stable values. For example, a corporate leader committed to long-term sustainability may publicly emphasize fiscal prudence during economic downturns, even while internally pursuing structural transformation. The appearance and the intention are aligned, though not transparently identical. 5. Fortune and acceptance. Perhaps the most intriguing convergence lies in the treatment of contingency. Machiavelli acknowledges that fortune governs roughly half of human affairs. Stoicism similarly emphasizes that many outcomes remain beyond our control. The divergence lies in response. Stoicism counsels acceptance. Machiavelli advocates bold engagement with fortune, even domination when possible. Psychologically, these represent two coping strategies. Acceptance reduces anxiety about uncontrollable variables. Assertive engagement increases agency where leverage exists. An advanced strategic posture might combine both. Accept what cannot be altered. Act decisively where influence remains possible. The error lies in confusing the two domains. Toward an integrated framework. When stripped of caricature, Machiavellian Stoicism address complementary dimensions of human action. One clarifies how power operates in unstable systems. The other clarifies how the self maintains coherence under pressure. A leader who internalizes only Machiavelli may become effective yet internally fragmented. A leader who internalizes only Stoicism may become serene yet politically irrelevant. The synthesis requires disciplined introspection combined with strategic realism. It requires emotional regulation without passivity, moral grounding without rigidity, adaptability without opportunism. In practical terms, this means regulate internal reactions before acting externally. Distinguish moral principles from inherited conventions. Recognize that perception shapes influence. Accept uncertainty while cultivating adaptive capacity. Such integration is rare precisely because it demands cognitive complexity. It resists ideological purity. Goodbye paragraph. If this exploration reshaped how you think about leadership, control, and moral agency, then the inquiry has only begun. In future episodes, we will continue dissecting the psychological foundations of power and self-mastery, drawing from philosophy, cognitive science, and strategic theory. If you want to develop clarity under pressure and insight beyond surface-level narratives, join the channel and follow the series. The discipline of thought is itself a form of power.